our laughing greeting team, Dave, Ripley, Rachel, somewhere in the background with their sourdough. You'll see them chatting hellos to you in the chat box. Please use the chat box through the service. It's one way we have to connect with one another as we are connecting in this Zoom online space. Come into our house and virtual space of hope and love, of peace and justice, of wholeness and healing. Come in where we welcome the certain and the seeking, the lifers and the newcomers, the beloved and the brokenhearted. All of you can find a home here at Throop, where we love the world from the heart of Pasadena and from the heart of our homes. I am pleased and delighted that today one of our frequent Throop lay sermonators and guest preachers, Lynn Sexton, is sharing her wisdom and experience with us this morning. We'll hear a spiritual journey reflection from Joe Versteinen. We will hear who this week's Super Trooper Award recipient is. And best of all, we get to be with one another, see one another's faces. If you haven't already done so, take just a minute and scroll through the thumbnail videos of your friends and neighbors and beloved troopers who have gathered here with you this morning. As much as you're able to, I just implore you and myself too to set your phone or device aside. Turn away from whatever it is on the periphery of your screen that might be grabbing for your attention, and instead take a breath and gently turn your heart and mind and attention toward this sacred space as we move across our threshold into worship together.
Our time together in worship is intimately connected with our daily lives. As a symbol of that connection, we light our home chalices in a spirit of love, hope, and peace. Please hear our words and the words of Amy Carol Webb. We light a candle to honor the people and ancestors whose lands we now occupy. In the chat box, you'll see a website that allows you to look up the tribal land you live upon based on zip code. Please feel free to put the tribe's name in the chat box. The land under and around Throop was once, and is still, the home of the Tongva people. May this knowledge and awareness lead us into seeking justice and equity for all. We light a candle symbolizing our hopes and bearing witness to the injustices in the world, for the art of sacred unknowing, humbled by all that we cannot fathom in this time. We come into the presence of what we do know, perhaps the only thing we can ever know, that love is now and forever, and everyone in every moment. Please feel free to type into the chat box the hopes you carry, the injustices we need to witness. We take a moment of silence, holding all of these in our hearts.
And one hope in particular I lift up this morning is the hope that the people fighting the fires around California are safe, that the people and animals whose lands are being impacted are as safe as possible. And I also lift up for us to witness the death in Pasadena of Anthony McLean, a Black man who was shot last week by the Pasadena police. And we hope that justice is brought in that very serious matter in our hometown in Pasadena. I invite you to now turn toward one another in the chat box and to continue your greeting this morning of one another. And thank you for Joe puts in a prayer for all animals. Brandy hopes for a better tomorrow. The chat box greeters are continuing their awesome job of making sure everyone is welcomed into this space. Terry offers greetings and wishes for a new semester for all students and families and teachers. And on that note, for any families, students, or teachers among us, we're going to have a special blessing next Sunday in the Zoom service. And if you would send me a picture of you teaching or learning or something, we would love to show you in next week's service. And you can just send me an email or a Facebook private message with those images. Denise says, good morning. Sky is sending warm love for the little ones with us today. Yes, indeed. Denise says, good morning, all. Melanie says, good morning. It's great to see you. She always loves having a Layla service so that we can hear the variety of our voices. All best love and thanks to Lynn. And indeed, that's really one of the values in Unitarian Universalism. We believe in the prophethood and priesthood of all believers. And Denise says this time's a blessing that she doesn't go out of her mind. And Doug Miller sends morning from Hawaii. Well, please continue to connect with one another. Again, if you haven't done so yet, and I have not, take a minute and scroll through the thumbnail videos of all of us gathered. Send your warm wishes, blessings, and love to each and every person who's gathered here today. We turn now toward our shared words of promise to our planet. And as those words come up, if you want to unmute yourself, and we'll share these words together. As
members of the family of living beings on earth, we are guided by the Unitarian Universalist principle, respect for the interdependent web of all of which we are a part. With hearts filled with love for it, eyes nurtured by its beauty, and minds ruminating on ways to protect scarce and sacred resources. We promise to nurture the well-being of all life and of the planet itself.
This summer, we've enjoyed a Summer Spiritual Caravan, and one way that has shown up is by us asking newer members of the congregation to share their spiritual journey story with us. It's a way for us to get to know them a little bit better, and of course, in hearing their words, it helps us understand more of our own journey. And this morning, I'm so happy and proud to send it over to Super Trooper Joe Versteinen. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Tara. It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to do this. Thank you all for being here. And I'd like to share with you, this is called my Unitarian moment. Here we go. My late father, Daniel Almond Versteinen, was, in a nutshell, an accountant, gardener, cook, a prolific reader who especially had a taste for the poetry of Walt Whitman, and a chronic listener of NPR. He was also a Unitarian Universalist, and he fathered, and my mother bore, the progeny of 3 children, my sister Emily, the eldest, Sarah, the baby, who's watching from Wisconsin today, and Joseph, me. In terms of religion, ours was an upbringing of loose beliefs, not rooted in God or Jesus. We celebrated Christmas, but we did not pray before meals and did not pray religiously or in general. We did, however, attend the Unitarian Church regularly on Sunday mornings in our hometown of Rockford, Illinois. So, yes, I was raised Unitarian. At every walk of my life and every town I've shuffled through, I sought out its Unitarian church. And in each church, I found a home, a family, and friends. In graduate school, I was a regular attendee of the Unitarian Church in DeKalb, Illinois. I sang in the church's choir. I did not know how to read music, therefore, much to the chagrin of the choir members next to me, I sang the song melodies and not the notes. So as I said, I joined the UU in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, a microcosm that edges the waters of Lake Michigan. It was a small but committed and hearty congregation. I played acoustic songs and sang Jesus Don't Want Me for a Sunbeam. I met Kent, who would become one of my dearest friends in perhaps the 2 most difficult places to meet friends. In a small town, and as I emerged in my mid-30s. One Sunday, I looked forward to attending church because I was slogging through the malaise of a breakup. I sought warmth and camaraderie of my fellow churchgoers to counter my sadness. Very nearly comically, and only as the universe could turn such an event, I was the only one who showed up for service. The minister was there, and we decided, in lieu of her sermon, to do some tidying up in the chapel, which, by way of mention, was actually a basement. As we worked, she asked how I was. I opened up to her about the rough period I was going through. She said, "Here," she said, "I will light a candle for you." She picked a candle that lay on its side on the table, lit its wick, and stuck it in a bowl of sand. I still have the picture of it I took. Yet I cannot remember if we finished cleaning the chapel. I do remember, however, being engulfed by a wave of human kindness that immobilized me, but gave me the strength to move forward. And now I am a proud member of Throop of Pasadena. But let's rewind a little bit. As times change, so do ministers. About 20 some years ago, as the Unitarian minister in Rockford ended his 30-year plus career, a few interim ministers cycled through and a new minister took the reins for us. Around that time, on a car drive with my father, he mentioned he witnessed one deliver a few services. He dilated about this one he particularly took a liking to. The minister was newer, incredibly likable, a great speaker, and when he made a mistake in his service, such as not getting a chalice to light or reading from a wrong page, he would diffuse the moment in genuine humor. Only, my father could not recall his name, and that minister was not the one who became the next one of the congregation. Fast forward about 3 years, my sisters and I had to bear the unfortunate passing of our beloved dad, and we were preparing for his memorial services. A gentleman by the name of Howell Lind visited us at our home. When I had a moment alone with him, I said, "Hey, a few years ago, my father mentioned to me this name of this intern minister in Rockford who was really likable, a great speaker, and he had a sense of humor about himself. And Unitarian Universalist minister Howell Lund said back to me, "I think your dad was talking about Phil Lund." I said then my father would have been over the moon to have Phil Lund do his service, and Howell said he would get back to me with Phil's number, and he did. So I called and left a message. Phil was living in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the time, 335 miles away from Rockford. My sisters and I, in the spirit of forced but necessary nourishment, were eating lunch when my phone rang. I stepped out to take the call. A voice on the other line said, "Joe, this is Phil Lund. I remember you and your dad, and I will do it." So, in the face of such a whacking loss and misfortune, I remember this ocean of hope that washed over me, that brought me back to baseline. It was like being baptized. I returned to the table and my sister Emily asked, "Who was that?" And I told her Phil Lund and relayed the story to her. And then she said, "You dope. Joe, Phil Lund was the one who officiated my wedding." So Phil flew down a few days later and delivered an encapsulating and thoroughly beautiful eulogy to honor mine, Emily, and Sarah's dad. A eulogy I still have, one for which, though I've tried, and I am sure Phil would say I have, will never, with all the words I have at my disposal, be able to sufficiently say thank you. Though most grand, however, that was not my Unitarian moment. But in the writing of this, and not to diminish the largesse of what I just talked about, was not my Unitarian moment, but a Unitarian moment. The writing of this revealed to me, like summer fleeting and returning, like leaves dropped from the trees in Illinois and then burst from their branches again, and how waves wash to shore and retreat and return again. A Unitarian moment happens over and over and over. There is no one Unitarian moment. I find it now in Tara's loving and inspiring words that fill our ears and hearts, in Liz's voice, in every note Chris plays on the piano, each stroll through the garden that reminds us of George's ferocious oneness with nature, and in every hand squeeze at the end of each service when we hold hands, or sitting next to Andriana in church choir. So I thank all of you for being part of my journey and for this Unitarian moment that I will steadfastly hold in my heart. Good health and blessed be.
Thank you so very much, Joe.
Thank you.
As we enter into a spirit of prayer or meditation, please hear the words of Maureen Killoran. Born in Canada, Reverend Maureen Killoran has, over the past 30 years, served UU congregations in Ohio, British Columbia, Oregon, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Maryland, Texas, and Florida. Holy grandparents of the universe, energies of creation, endless mysteries of life. You are the music that sounded before the world was born, sound and silence woven throughout the ages, far beyond the most profound wisdoms humanity has been able to touch. Be with us. Deepen our willingness to live without certainty, to take the risk of living on the edges of our creativity, to step beyond the boundaries of possibility and hope. Help us always to remember that we are, in our essence, the magic of star stuff, that we are kin to all that is and was and may yet come to be. Teach us to temper our impatience, to retain our conviction that what we do makes a difference, that even our smallest act can contribute to the good of a greater whole. Be with my uncertainties, rejoice with my small triumphs. Comfort my losses. Remind me that I am never alone, not in my joys or in my tears. In the blessing of our silence, may I feel your presence, something greater than I have been yet able to comprehend. At this time, you may lift up names of people in need of healing in the chat box, and I will read some of them aloud. Jean Alper, Lupe Planck, Richard Maison. For those who suffer from chronic pain and illnesses. Eileen Kettering, my dear friend Sharon, Mike Cinderband, Robert Miller, anyone who is hungry, Majil K. May all these and those unspoken, and Willow Jacobson, to those without a home, my best friend's sister, her husband, and 3 children, all of whom tested positive recently for COVID. The woman who slept on my neighbor's porch last night. The street people. May all of these and those unspoken be truly and irrevocably blessed. Blessed be. We have a music video called Dona Nobis Pacem, which translates to grant us peace. The very number 2020 caused imagination and speculation decades ago as to what life might be like when we got to that year. By and large, I think that it is fair to say that all of the issues many of us thought or feared we saw coming, the coronavirus and our response to it either wasn't on the list or at the very least was much further down the list than most of us count it today when we think about what challenges our day-to-day lives. And I think that's okay. Of all the promises held forth by any type of spiritual practice of which I am aware, not one has offered us predictability. So even those of us who have a regular practice have been faced with questions about what to make of it all and how best to care for ourselves and others in this unprecedented time. Many of us have taken on a project or two to help us through the uncertainty. I love my CD collection. When I was a corporate professional, I joked that I invested in CDs, and I was only half joking. Initially, mine was not a huge collection, but I chose things that I loved. In the past decade, no one has been more delighted than I to see CDs be passed over for newer technologies. This made a plethora of CDs that used to cost upwards of $20 when they were new, available in secondhand shops, often for as little as $1 each. Generally still within my budget. I recently purchased yet another CD rack, this time deciding that I wanted to mount one on the wall at eye level, close to my player for my very favorite CDs. As I began rearranging decades, sounds, and memories, it occurred to me that this is what I had been doing in my spiritual practice recently, by prayer and meditation. It feels very much like looking through a kaleidoscope, letting the colored bits of glass fall into new patterns and appreciating them in new light. Words matter tremendously now. We have some new words and new meanings for words we have known. But just at a time when words matter so much, they can sometimes seem difficult to immediately comprehend and to deploy correctly. At times like these, I find processing feelings and ideas is sometimes best done first in images. After I've seen an image, then I can begin to articulate what it means and make sense of it in words. But how do you go about doing that? First of all, don't take yourself too seriously. When I decided to stop working for law firms as a paralegal and jump into temp work, it was just as computers were coming into widespread use. It was quite a leap, but everyone was willing to teach you something. If you took advantage of opportunities, you could do well, and I did. But I knew that for a moment I was flying by the seat of my pants. So it meant a tremendous amount to me when the manager of my agency presented me with the Employee of the Month award. I got a certificate and a catalog from which I selected this candy dish, which remained on my desk for the rest of my corporate days. It really was just the right encouragement at the right time, and I guess my manager knew that. But at the moment, I felt like pretty big stuff. So when I went grocery shopping the next day at Lucky's, I looked with interest when I picked up a half-gallon of Jersey-made milk. They had an Employee of the Month too, and I wanted to see who my counterpoint was. Must be someone pretty important, I thought. Thank goodness for the universe having a way of letting you know when you take yourself too seriously. I am here to report that Jersey Maid's Employee of the Month was a Holstein. I cannot tell you how many times that image has allowed me to get out of my own way. No doubt Bessie was a very deserving recipient, and to this day, I owe that Holstein a lot. Anytime I am tempted to get too serious about my place in the universe, I can laugh and stay loose because of my fellow Employee of the Month. Secondly, practice non-resistance. I don't recall the how or why of it now, but one semester in high school, I somehow had study hall. Our teacher was a sturdy, no-nonsense woman who mainly taught French. She had long gray hair that she wore in a braid across the top of her head. And she wore rimmed glasses. She could be stern, and she brought football players to tears if she thought it was for their own good. But she could be remarkably compassionate, and she seemed to care when I struggled. One day I was having a miserable time with an algebra problem, and in my frustration, I was saying I just couldn't get it. She rose from her desk and stood in front of me. The best way I can put it is that she locked onto me on an emotional level, and she didn't let go. Stop it. Stop saying that it is too hard. She had to repeat herself several times before she got through to me. She then more gently explained, the energy that you are putting into saying that you cannot do it is energy that you could put to better use focusing on solving the problem. Her wisdom finally got through to me. I calmed down, and eventually I solved the problem. More importantly, her deeper message has stayed with me ever since. I believe it has some application besides a mathematical one. Usually, there is little I can do to change difficult facts that are not to my liking. If I can get past that, I can move on to solving the problem, or at least learning how to live with it. But there is a point where I need to let myself grieve things that are not the way that they were, or the way that I think they should be. There is a time and a place for this, but it takes as long as it takes, as often as it takes. And doing so properly requires the third element: be compassionate. Be gentle with yourself. Our second principle calls for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. That means everybody, but it begins with you. There is nothing that prepares you to be compassionate with your neighbor, like figuring out how to be compassionate with yourself. Give yourself space to feel what you feel. Sometimes the hardest thing I do is rather than explain to myself why a feeling I have is not so important, is to just feel that feeling and to say to myself, yeah, huh. After that, it is easier to sort out what to do with it. But first, it must be felt. Sorting out who you are in this moment and how your own piece now fits together to make a whole that serves the larger community is the work of this season. As with kaleidoscopes, our job is to let light shine through us, even as we make room for the light to shine in new and shifting patterns. Once you see the images, then the words may come, and we may be transformed by our new understanding.
There is more love somewhere keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
Lynn, thank you for shining your light on all of us, and your words were so deeply meaningful. I hope you're taking a moment to look through the chat box at the affirmations and comments that were inspired by your words. Thank you. I'll just be honest, last March when all of this started, your board and I really had no idea how we might be gathering or whether we might still be gathering in this way in August and September. There was so much uncertainty. We should have known that Throop would kind of rise to the occasion, that you would show up as Lynn talked about shining the light, that you all would shine your light on this community. And it's in large part due to all of you. It's like how we're still able to gather in this way and have a vision knowing that we will be gathering in person one day, though it may not be tomorrow. I can guarantee you it won't be tomorrow. And thank you for all the time and talent you shared with us through this stressful and tough summer. And thank you for your very generous financial giving. And because of you, we've been able to maintain staff. We've been able to continue having Sunday worship. Because of your financial giving, we're dreaming about ways to do faith formation and some other ways of gathering this fall. We'll be dropping the online ways to give in the chat box. You can always send a check into Throop, but really because of your many acts of generosity, we've been able to maintain our commitment to the UUA Fair Share program. Thank you so much for your time, talent, and treasure. Thank you also this morning for all the people who have helped in worship. But before we get into those official thanks, I'd like to hand it over to Taryn Sindaband, Vice President of the Board, who will present this morning's Super Trooper Award. And Taryn can unmute.
Someone who has done a lot this summer is new member Adriana Gutierrez. She led weekly Zoom dinner early on in the pandemic. She sings in choir. She edits video and is serving on our new racial justice team. Congratulations, Adriana. We appreciate you.
Yay. Thank you, Taryn. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you so much to today's chat box greeters. It's been Ripley and Dave and Rachel. Thank you to Lynn again for your poignant reflection. Thank you, Joe, for reminding all of us to look for our Unitarian moments in our lives. I'm definitely gonna remember that and so much from today's service. For all that we give our Throop community, for the ways we impact the world beyond us, let's say together the thanks for this morning's offering. For the ministries
of the church and our community, we bless our offering with love, hope, and hope.
And we continue to take these warm feelings, these connections that we've created here this morning with us into the coming week. I hope that you'll check out Tuesday Tidings and Facebook for ways to connect with small groups. I know Chris is still inviting people into choir, and as he always says, it's no audition, all voices welcome. They meet on Thursday night, and you can just send him a private message right now to find out more information about that. If you have lit a chalice this morning, I invite you to bring it forward. And we extinguish its flame, but we carry that light with us in our hearts. And Lynn shares our words of benediction.
Please hear the words of Rebecca Ann Parker. Even when our hearts are broken by our own failure or the failure of others cutting into our lives, even when we have done all we can and life is still broken, there is a universal love that has never broken faith with us and never will.
Thank you again, Lynn. We invite you to stay for our coffee chat and some directed reflection discussion. We'll have a postlude from Chris. Please stay for this, then get more coffee and tea and come back here for our coffee hour chat.